This is the Lockpicking Lawyer, and today I'm continuing my Inside Perspective series, showing certain lockpicking operations from the inside of the lock. We've already covered standard and spooled pins, so today we're moving on to serrated pins. Like spool pins, the term serrated can be used to describe a range of conceptually similar security pins, but the ones I've loaded in this lock are pretty standard. To compare, here are a few different serrated pins that I had laying around. Now, serrated pins are something that really tend to give new pickers trouble because they feel a click on a pin and they think it's set. And in the case of a serrated pin, they could be right, but it's a lot more likely that they're wrong. So, this is the point in your picking journey that you absolutely must learn what a pin stack feels like when it's set. And I'm going to show you what to look for. But first, I'm going to show you why it's generally not a good idea to rake serrated pins. Then we're going to single pin pick them. And finally, I'll open this lock using a Lishi tool. You'll see with this wave rake that the pin stack sees up really quickly. You can see after just a moment of raking, all those pins are seized up in the shear line. Let's do that one more time. Once again, these serrations have been bound up in the shear line, so raking generally isn't very helpful. With single pin picking, the trick is not to touch a pin unless it's binding firmly, and you're generally done with a pin stack when it moves, but there's only a tiny range of motion under spring tension. I think you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Nothing on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is binding firmly. Nice click there. Back to the beginning. Little bit of motion on 1, leave him alone. 2 is binding. Nice click there. Another click. Now we have a tiny bit of motion, so we're going to leave him alone. A little bit of motion on 3. Click out of 4. 4 is still binding. Little bit of motion, so let's leave 4 alone. 5 is binding. Click there, still binding. We have a tiny range of motion under spring tension. 5 could be set. Same for 6. Number 1 is binding, little click there, and now we have some movement. Some movement on 2. 3 is binding very firmly. Click there, still binding. Still binding. Now we have a tiny bit of movement under spring tension. 3 could be set. Little click out of 4. We have that movement again. Same on 5, 6. Back to the beginning. 1 is binding very firmly. Click there. Little bit of movement under spring tension. 1 could be set. 2 is binding firmly. Click, 2 is still binding firmly. There we go, little bit of motion under spring tension, 2 could be set. Same for 3. 4 is binding very tightly. Click, 4 is still binding. Another click, and we got this open. Okay, let's move on to a Lishi tool, and we'll be looking for the exact same things while we're picking with the Lishi. Little motion on 1, let's leave him alone. 2 is binding, click there. 2 is still binding. Another click, and we have a little bit of movement on 2, let's leave him alone for now. Tiny bit of motion on 3, we're going to leave him alone. 4 is binding tightly, click there. Still binding. Still binding. There we go, we have a tiny bit of motion under spring tension. Let's leave 4 alone for now. 5 is binding, click there. Little bit of motion under spring tension, we'll leave him alone. 6 is binding. 6 feels set, back to the beginning. 1 is binding. Click there, still binding. Little bit of motion under spring tension. 1 could be set. 2 is binding. Click there. 2 could be set. 3 is binding. Still binding. Still binding. Little bit of motion under spring tension. 3 could be set. 4 could be set. 5 is binding. Click there. Still binding. Little bit of motion under spring tension. 5 feels set. Click out of 6 and we got this open. Okay, folks, I hope you found that helpful, but that's all I have for you today. If you do have any questions or comments about this, please put them below. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, have a nice day. Thank you.